Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Welcome back to another day in the life of a therapist video. I'm drinking some yerba buena tea, starting off the morning with breakfast because I'm gonna go ahead and go to the gym and get a workout in before I get my day started. So today we are going to be talking about my experience in community mental health. You all voted for this video, and I'm really excited to share my experience with you all because it was such an important time in my life that really shaped and molded who I am as a therapist now. It had a lot to do with that. And if you've watched my previous videos, you know that it was also one of the most stressful times in my life. So we're going to talk about all of that, but first things first, gonna start the day off with some self-care. I ended up taking the day off today because I've been dealing with a lot of family things and trying to dedicate time to that. And so this morning is going to be about taking care of me, making sure that I'm grounded, and of course I also have notes to do. So today's gonna be a notes day and just responding to any client emails or texts, filming. Usually that's Mondays, but I definitely need an extra day, so I'm gonna take today to take care of myself. I'm gonna drink this up, watch a little bit more of YouTube, and then go ahead and head out to the gym.
She said I won't be back in a while. Don't wait. Already packed her bags, called the cab, made space. And she said I won't answer if you call me when you're lonely. I guess I let her go. Never mind, it's too late. But I can't believe I let you slip. I think about it 7 days a week, and this just can't be how it's supposed to end up. It's not enough. And maybe time will make you fade, but I don't know if I'm ready to just let you go away like my friends think I should. Cause what if I just wanna be with you? I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. Honestly, I can't remember if you love me, or maybe I'm just feeling lonely, I don't know. Just let her go. She got herself a guy, and he's good, no, he's great. Everything she wanted packed behind the pretty face. But I kinda hope he breaks her heart into little pieces and let me pick them all back up, put them back together. But I can't believe I let you slip. I think about it 7 days a week, and this just can't be how it's supposed to end.
Hi everyone, so it is later in the day right now. It is currently 3:24. So I went through my morning, went to the gym, and I spent most of the day working on notes and catching up on that. So I thought we could go ahead and start talking a little bit about my time in community mental health and what that was like for me. And so I'll give you all like context and background first. So I worked with a community mental health agency that specifically services South Texas. So I worked with this agency for about a year, and my job title was facilitator. And so basically I was a facilitator slash case manager. I worked with adolescents and their families, and specifically the adolescents were my client, but my job was to manage other case managers. And so the facilitators that worked here had all these teams of different case managers that were assigned to different adolescents and their families. And so I had various case managers that I would help manage and that I would work with within the team, and the adolescents that they worked with. And truly, I cannot even put into words how much I loved that job. I loved the adolescents that I worked with. I loved getting to do that. And if it weren't because the work environment itself was so toxic, the turnover rate was terrible. It was completely terrible, and it still continues to be, because unfortunately mental health facilities like that don't make the changes necessary to help their employees live healthier lives is just the way that it's going to be. And ultimately I left because of those reasons. I experienced anxiety, panic attacks because I was so stressed, so incredibly stressed. And that's when my PCOS symptoms really flared up, because there was a lot going on in my life, including this job. That was the last job. La última gota que derramó el vaso was this job, and it was too much. The program that I worked for itself, I loved what it stood for. I loved the mission, what we did. Because when asked what city I want to work in, I volunteered to work in the city that I grew up in, which was Alton, Texas, which is very much near McAllen, Texas, or McAllen, Texas, where I currently live right now. It's very, very close, but I grew up specifically in that other city. And so I chose that specific city because I knew the area, I knew what it was like growing up there, and I really wanted to work with other adolescents and other families. And so I was assigned certain adolescents and their families, and my job was to check in with the case managers that were also assigned to them. I would meet with the adolescents 1 to 2 times a week, and then we would have about monthly meetings with their families. So in these team meetings, the goal was to have them with natural supports around them, so their support system, like parents, certain family members, people within their community, school members, because part of the strategy and technique that we used within this program was to surround these adolescents with good and healthy relationships and people in their lives who could be there for them when we weren't there and could help set them up for success and try to work with their families and also teach them skills. And that was more of the case manager's job, and my job was to manage that, host the meetings, and meet with my adolescents and check in with them. And so today, if you were to take that job and offer it to me and there wasn't this high quota that there was at the time, because that's honestly what killed me, was the fact that the quota was just so unrealistic and just too much. And as someone who strives to do a great job in what I do, I just could not. Like, it killed me to know that I couldn't meet the standard, and what was needed to do. And I feel like to work that kind of job and to do it consistently for a long time, you have to be able to let things slide and not give an F, about letting your supervisor down or things not going according to plan. And I cannot do that. We're all different, and there's different work settings that work for everyone, but specifically there was the high quota that just did not give me the time that I needed, because on top of managing that, I also had to manage my time extremely wisely, because sometimes you would schedule in when you were going to see these adolescents, whether it be you were seeing them at their school, you were seeing them after school hours, you were seeing them at home. You had to meet with them a certain number of times. So if you didn't meet with them, that was on you. That was on you, and you could lose your job. I can't even begin to tell you all how much I loved working with my adolescents, and I miss them so much. I hope that wherever they are in the world, that they're okay, because I really loved them and I really cared for them so much. It was really hard to leave that workplace, and truly, I kept going because of them, and I cared about them so much. So I would definitely have not lasted as long as I did if it weren't because of the work I got to do with them. And I do know that I was really good at my job, because the amount of crises with my adolescents went down, suicides went down. There was a lot of good that was happening, and I loved that work because I always saw myself working with adolescents and working with their families. So getting to do that was just so fundamental for me. The thing that ultimately helped me was thinking of those adolescents that I worked with and thinking, I need to finish grad school so that I can become a therapist and work with my clients and get to do the actual work that I want to do in therapy with them, and get to really work with the techniques with my clients. Because when I was working with some of my adolescents, they would talk to me about their therapists and how some of them had their therapist, but they also had me, they also had their case manager. So it was a whole team, and we were there to support these adolescents and their families. And just hearing the relationship that they build with their therapist and how special that was, that really fueled me to continue the last bit of grad school and just see it through and finish, so that I could finally be a counselor and a therapist and get to work with clients in that way and create that kind of impact. And I think both jobs create impact. I really needed to do the thing that I wanted to do, but that was such an important time period of my life. I'm gonna go ahead and get going because I have to prep for my sessions, but I will talk to y'all in the evening when I finish with my therapy clients, and we will get into some stories and just more tidbits about my time in community mental health. But even just talking about it with you all and reminiscing is bringing back so many memories for me. So I will talk to you all in a little bit. everyone. So it is a new day. Sometimes as therapists, as counselors, we end up having to do crisis intervention, and so that's what ended up happening. But I still wanted to finish off this video for you all and finish talking to you all about my experience in community mental health. And so the program that I worked with, the core purpose was to help adolescents who were struggling emotionally, behaviorally, psychologically, who were going in and out of inpatient hospitals, to help them create a life for themselves that was healthier for their mental health, decrease suicide ideation, attempts. And some of the options that they also had were animal assisted therapy, art therapy, music therapy, recreational therapy, nutritional coaching. So there were different things that we could help advocate for our clients with and help get them into certain programs. And so that is one of the things that I loved about the program, the fact that these community resources were available to people in the community, especially those who came from low income situations. Now, because of this, what I also didn't like was the amount of pressure and workload that this placed on the employees themselves, right? So the quotas that we had to meet that went in line with any grants that were funded. And something that's really important to know is that not every community mental health agency is the same, and not every role within that agency is the same, because there were case managers who had completely different experiences from us as facilitators, and there were other employees within the agency who had also different experiences because they didn't spend as much time out of office and they spent more time in office. So of course their experience was going to be different from those of us who spent most of our time driving and who were out in the community. And so I'm going to go over like a typical day in my life back at that time. So I would wake up, clock into work through the computer that they gave me, and then I would get ready to head out of my home to start doing visits. Summertime was the best time because we could see our clients. It was so much easier, but the moment they went back into school was the hardest to be able to see them, because of course we did not want to be taking them out of their classes, but sometimes that was the only time that we could get a hold of them. So you had to deal with teachers and administrators being angry at you at times and being able to advocate and navigate those things. And me personally, I always tried my best to not go to school unless the school really wanted our support. In that way, I would rather go to the client's home. And again, because of the quota situation, I hated the fact that we had to always see clients a certain number of hours, a certain number of time, because honestly, it was just too much. It's very overwhelming for families, for another person to constantly be there, especially if a child didn't want it. And I don't think every case should have been treated the same. Some of my clients really did want me to be there multiple times a week. It was their escape from their abusive household. It was a time where they could get some separation, because a typical day for me when I'd go visit my clients, I really liked taking them out of their home situation for a little bit. Because of the clients that I had, a lot of them grew up similar to me, where they didn't have access to a lot of things. Their parents were working very much, trying to provide for them, so they didn't really get to go out much. A lot of the kiddos that I worked with had never even stepped foot in a library before. Even though for some it might be like, well, it's just a drive away, why couldn't they go? When you grow up being a child of immigrant parents who have to work really hard, and you're having to also work through things like generational trauma and so many other factors that go into what is experienced culturally, even something that can seem as simple as, well, take your children to the library or take your children to the park, is something that is not always easy for all parents, and things that have to be learned. And so a huge part of my job was being able to speak with the parents and the family members and with the adolescents and maintaining a healthy balance, because if you upset the parent, then the adolescent sometimes was affected. So being able to navigate those dynamics and create a healthier relationship. So sometimes there were times that I just wanted to let some parents like truly have it, just say things in a certain way. But my role as the facilitator was to facilitate, meaning I had to take into consideration how that could affect my adolescents or the clients that I was working with. And some cases were really hard. Some days I would come home just not wanting to leave my adolescents because I knew some of the environments that they were staying in. And it's so hard because the mission of the program was to keep families together. And as much as I believe that, and I really want that. Sometimes there were situations where it wasn't the healthiest environment for a child, and CPS would constantly be involved. So it was such an interesting experience because I wanted the best for my clients, and I think that's also why I really wanted to become a therapist too, because as a therapist, my job in individual therapy is to focus on the well-being for my client themselves. And I do take into consideration the family, and I love working with families because I believe in our collectivist culture and how important it is to include that. But sometimes we do have to recognize that parents need help and they need to learn the skills to be able to be those healthy relationships for their kiddos, because that's not always the case. So a lot of who I am as a therapist now really developed from those times and just seeing what my clients went through, because I was in their home space so much. I could see the way that they were interacting with their families. I could see how their medication sometimes affected them, or hear about the things that normally maybe clients would sometimes forget about when they see you in therapy. I was there in the moments when the drama was happening or when things were going down and clients were entering into crisis real time, and knowing how to navigate that. Some of my favorite stories from back then was working with one of my adolescent boys. At the time, I remember he really struggled to trust me and to trust any facilitator because he had gone through so many, because again, the turnover rate was just really hard. And something that I tried to remind my clients of at the time was, I don't know how long I'm going to be here with you, but the time that I am here with you, I am going to try to make this a really good time for you, and I'm going to give it my best. I want to make sure that you have a good experience. And so I really tried to remind them of that because I didn't know how long I would be there. And it was hard for adolescents because once they bonded with you, and also for adults, but I specialize more with the adolescents. And so it's really hard for them to lose a relationship that is consistent and that is healthy for them, especially with a lot of the things that they were going through. And with this kiddo, we built rapport, as you would call in the therapy world. But we built our trusting relationship, and I asked if he would be comfortable sharing his notebook with me because I saw he was carrying it with him, and he was really hesitant at first, of course, as anyone would be. And I just let him know, like, hey, if you ever do want to share it, I would love to read, what you have in there. Clearly it's special to you, but only when you feel comfortable. And he really opened up and he let me see his notebook. He wrote poetry, he wrote songs, raps. So whenever I'd go visit him and we'd do like our car rides, I specifically would take him to coffee shops, or I would take him to the local library, or I would take him like on his way to school or from school. And during that time, we would dedicate our session to him sharing his music and what he had written, what it meant to him. It was really a connection to his emotions and being able to foster that more. And so eventually I advocated at one of our local coffee shops, because they had an open mic night, to see if he could perform. And we mentally prepped him to do that, and he did end up performing. And people, part of our team, went to go watch him perform, and it was really special. Some of his family members got to go watch him perform, and I tried to always remind him to never give up on his dream of rapping or of creating music in whatever capacity he chose to do that in the future. So really giving that emotional care that wasn't always present because of his life circumstances, which I won't go into because that's personal. But I was so proud of him. I was so proud of the work that we did together, and I loved it. Part of the job was creating these community supports, right? Interacting with our local community to create these natural supports for them and to foster the things that they loved and enjoyed doing. And seeing my client's growth of him learning to talk about his feelings, even with his family members, was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful experience. And there's so many other stories like this. One of the biggest things that I did was always carry like crayons and a notebook and certain games with me if I'd go visit clients, so that I could take them outside of their home space for a little bit. And sometimes I look like us having session in my car if I was transporting clients, or we would have sessions at our local library. And sometimes we would do like expressive arts therapy. I would have them draw their feelings, their emotions, or just have them them do a recreational activity as we would talk about their day. So a lot of the talk therapy and me just checking in with them each time to see how things were going with school, with their home life, with their personal life, with their friends. And I truly loved being able to transport clients for a little bit and give them a break and help them experience something new. Having experiences like that can seem as simple for someone else, like just being exposed to going to a local library and reading books and seeing your experiences reflected and being around other kids your age in these spaces, I would just see them light up and get really excited to get to be transported and to go somewhere and to do something a little different outside of their normal home life routine and to gradually learn the skills that they needed. Other stories were when case managers would be teaching some of the clients skills, I would help reinforce that with them. So I would talk to the case manager and check in on what they'd be working on with the adolescent. And so when I'd meet with them, if they were working on learning adulting skills from 16, 17 to almost 18 years old and transitioning into adulthood, sometimes I would help them work through their anxiety. They had trouble making phone calls or going to buy their own hygiene products or things like that. We would go practice those things, go to different stores and help them practice those life skills. With one of my clients, I also helped them learn how to get on a bus, on a local bus, and learned how that works. So there's so many different things that we got to do. And I personally found that to be so much fun. I'm a creative person, so I loved getting to be creative in that way. And I wish that, again, the job would have been different because the program itself I loved. I think it's such important work that's being done in the community. And because of this, now that I am a licensed counselor, I still incorporate these skills that I learned from the case managers or that I learned as a facilitator. So life skills is something that I utilize within the work that I do as a therapist with my adolescents. So sometimes we will have cooking sessions during our therapy session, or I will be helping them with their homework, learning how to manage their anxiety when it comes to that, their self-talk, and we'll do activities during session. And so my past experience really helped shape who I am as a therapist because I really sat down with those experiences, and from them I learned that sometimes we do just need someone there who can provide us that emotional care at first as we're learning to build that within ourselves, and who can help be there with us as we're learning these life skills and as we're creating these connections and these community natural supports. Some other things that I really liked from working in community mental health were the coworkers and the people that I worked with. They were my people. I loved them so much, and I still love them so much. And sometimes we talk here and there if we need support from each other. We've helped each other with being each other's job references at times. So these are people that we're forever trauma bonded with because of what we went through in that job role. And I remember at first when I applied for this job, I didn't even know that this was the job that I was applying for. I thought that I was applying for a case management job, and then me and the other person who had also applied, I remember we were just blindsided and told, hey, I know you had applied for this, but we actually need you for this instead, because they had lost the facilitators at the time, which of course was the first red flag. So some of the tips that I have for you all when it comes to community mental health is really becoming informed as much as you can about the agency itself, and during the interview process, making questions beforehand, before you go in, questions such as, what is the quota? Is there a quota that we have to meet? I would like to know the details of that. What happens if we can't meet that quota? How does training work? How long is training? And also create an exit plan for yourself. This is something that I really wish that I had done. I truly went into this already knowing that it was not going to be a good experience. This agency had the reputation for being the place where it was high burnout, where you knew that if you came out of this, you'd be able to say, if I can work here, I can work anywhere. In our university, word spread really quick about how this agency worked and what it was like. And so you knew you'd get a lot of experience, but it would also come at a cost. Of course, it was going to be a very stressful job setting. And so I wish that I had sat down and told myself, hey, you have 4 to 5 months to give this a try, see how it goes. If you do not like it, these are the steps to take to exit, because as soon as you're in this kind of setting, it's really hard to leave. It becomes really hard to leave because you start really drinking that Kool-Aid of the setting where you're at, to the point where it almost becomes a badge of honor to stay longer, even though no one's winning. No one's truly happy, no one's winning. A lot of the people that worked there were very miserable, were very unhappy, and you could see it. Like, I didn't even want to be in the office. None of us had a dedicated office. You would walk in and we all be in like these little cubicle sections, and no cubicle was yours. Like, if there was one open, you'd go and you'd take it. But the moment I would walk into that room, if my coworker friends weren't there, I would leave. And if they were there and we tried to talk for a little bit, there were always supervisors walking around that wouldn't let you talk or would come get after. Like, certain case managers even like be trying to talk to them, and honestly sometimes just relax and like have a good conversation, because the work that we did was just so stressful. And so I honestly did my very best to be out of the office as much as possible, which came with the challenge of trying to manage my time and the driving. I was mostly on the road driving throughout most of my workday, and the summers were brutal. They're brutal here in South Texas, like in the hundreds. And sometimes I'd go visit some of my adolescents and families, and they didn't have AC in their home, so they'd be living in 100 and some degree weather without AC, and I was already dehydrated just being there for a little bit, and this was their life 24/7. That also meant that I'd be eating out a lot, because even if I tried to meal prep, my food tended to go bad because I'd never make it back into the office at the time that I needed to, because if you could catch a client at a certain time, you would catch them. It was the type of place where it's really hard to set healthy work boundaries, because that often meant that you wouldn't meet your quota if you did that, which in turn meant that you'd lose your job. And at that point, I was so young. I was in my early to mid 20s that I didn't know how to stand up for myself at the time and how to advocate for myself, because some of the people that I worked with and that were more on like a supervisory level, they were very rigid and strict people, and even the ones that weren't, they could only advocate for you so much, you know, as much as they tried to, because of how the place is run. And so yes, I definitely recommend having an exit plan. Do not stay longer than you need to stay, because these type of work settings really, over time, because they can be very toxic and abusive, they truly make you believe that you have no other option and that you're stuck, when in reality we're not. And sometimes the option is not one that we like. Like, I know for me, when I left that job, I went to work in something completely different. I was literally working at a vitamin shop, you know, after I quit that job, because I was so burnt out, unhealthy, unwell, that I just needed time to recover. And I remember that time working in that, even though it was difficult, like mentally, just because of how I felt, it was also one of the healthiest times for me, where I was recovering from my burnout. It was exactly what I needed at the time as I was finishing grad school. I also recommend taking time to reflect and really noting what skills you want to learn, because again, it's really hard once you're in there to really do this. So reflect on, what are the skills that I want to learn? It's always a good idea to give yourself the opportunity to see what an agency is like. Learn to set the boundaries that you can, saying no when you can say no. And if you're working with people who you constantly have to say no to the point where it's tiring you out and it's causing you anxiety or depression symptoms, then it is more than okay for you to leave that work setting. It doesn't mean that you're a failure or that you can't hack it. Some places are just unhealthy workplaces. So that is some of my experience in community mental health, everyone. There are so many more stories. This video could last forever, but I hope that you enjoyed hearing a little bit about that. If you have experience in community mental health and you've had a good experience or you've had a terrible experience and you feel comfortable sharing with us down in the comment section, please feel comfortable to share. If you've had good experiences, give some people some hope down in the comment section, because I know people have shared with me that they have had really great experiences. And if you know of a good place to work, also leave it down in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this day in the life video, everyone. I really hope that it was helpful to you, and if you have any further questions that I didn't get to or didn't answer, definitely let me know in the comment section. Take care, everyone, and I will go ahead and see you in my next video. Bye.